Hey everybody, welcome to the Song Revolution podcast, brought to you by Nashville Christian Songwriters. Nashville Christian Songwriters exists to empower Christian songwriters worldwide. I'm John Chisum, and this podcast exists to bring you valuable songwriting insights, inspiration, interviews, and just all around good fun with some of the greatest songwriters, producers, arrangers, artists, and creatives, and beyond. You can find out a whole lot more about us at NashvilleChristianSongwriters.com. Hey, all you song revolutionaries out there listening today, thanks for tuning into the show. I am so pumped because I get to introduce to you someone that you may have missed. Unless you're familiar with the Reformed University Fellowship and Indelible Grace music, you just might have missed the incredible gift that is Sandra McCracken. She's the quintessential independent artist. She's just not gone the way of being signed to a record company, but has released 12 recordings to date and has garnered a loyal following the world over for her folk-driven music that's rooted in gospel hymnody. She's also had songs recorded by All Sons and Daughters, Caedmon's Call, Audrey Assad, and even used on ABC's Grey's Anatomy. Our conversation was so cool today. It was deep, it was profound, and it was fun. We delved into the spiritual, theological, and musical motivations behind her soulful, organic sound, and she gave us many valuable insights into her life, ministry, and her songwriting process. We talked about how she discovered deeper worship than she'd ever known in the dorm rooms at Belmont University. We talked about her, once she started getting opportunities, how she really resisted commercializing the gospel in music distribution. And yet, as ironically, she was part of starting a national university movement called the Reformed University Fellowship that has actually spawned a record company that promotes depth of theology in music called Indelible Grace Music. We talked about the importance of music being shaped by a biblical worldview, how all of life is sacred. We talked about what she reads, her songwriting disciplines. We talked about technology. We talked about her new CD, DVD release called Steadfast and all that went into that, and just what her life is like in general as a single parent and as just a great independent recording artist, songwriter, and producer. So sit back and get ready for some unfiltered inspiration with prolific songwriter, indie artist, and Indelible Grace music producer, Sandra McCracken. Well, hey, John Chisum here for the Song Revolution podcast, sitting in this amazing, posh kind of, what do you call this, business building. Yeah. Down in the Gulch. Are we in the Gulch?
We are squarely in the Gulch.
All right, squarely in the Gulch with...
So, modern office, but with an old-fashioned couch.
There you go.
Is that Nashville for you, or what?
Sandra McCracken, so good to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much, John.
Yeah,
it's good to be here.
Yeah, I loved already visiting pre-show and just kind of catching up on... A little bit of life, kids.
Yes.
You got 2, 8 and 10. Mine's grown. She's a grown woman, and here we are... Just ready to talk about music, ready to talk about your life. As I was telling you before the show, I love researching artists that I don't know a lot about. And I'd known your name for years and heard about you with Reformed University Fellowship and Indelible Grace music. But digging in and listening to your current project and your past projects, I got a lot of respect for you already.
Thank you.
So,
Thanks so much.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. So, we don't really structure these terribly so, just like to see where the Spirit leads us. Yeah. But so maybe let's start today with just tell us a little bit about your background and kind of how did you ever know you were going to be in music in the first place, your younger years and all that?
Thank you. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm the youngest of a big family, and we always had music on the record player. It was really, a record player, and it's a very big piece of furniture that took over the house, And we had, in that room, it was the front room, so you'd come in and the record player was on the right side, and there was a tiled wall that was like mirrors, which is, I don't know, kind of a weird thing. Maybe that's cool again. I think we've come full circle.
Full circle back, yeah.
But it was kind of a room that everyone gravitated toward. This was the room where the Christmas tree was. And I just feel like that was the place where the music was happening. So that, and then the room next door was the family room connected to like an eat-in kitchen. We didn't have like a formal dining room. It was just this little ranch house, 5 kids. So we're all piled in there on top of each other. But the way that those two places, so the table and the record player, were really the 2 points of attraction in the house. And so I didn't have a lot of musical upbringing, but other than in that informal way where it was part of life. And I was very drawn to the folk tradition, like songs that my siblings were into, narrative songwriters like Johnny Cash and it's funny, John Denver, the Eagles, and branching out from there. And yeah, I mean, my dad loved like the Stones and blues, and my mom she didn't have like anything on the record player as much, but then later as she got into church music and church culture, there was like, praise music, which was like really formative, I think, that she loved it and had it on repeat all the time. And it kind of just got in my bloodstream alongside the old hymns that we would hear at church. And somehow all of that has pulled in together to form maybe that's kind of the big pot of stew that I draw from. If I'm like ladling some out for songwriting, it just is what comes out. In a lot of ways that gets more and more, it's not like the writing becomes nostalgic, but there's this direct connection to those early years. As I get older, I feel like I connect more to that stuff that's so core to who I am and less about what I'm listening to right at this moment. So it's not so much. So when I sit down to write, it doesn't necessarily reflect what I'm listening to on in my car stereo, or in my headphones,
Right.
But it's more like what's really deep in there, and that's what's still coming out. So
That's so cool. So when did you know you were going to be doing this, or did you ever really know and it just happened?
I don't know. I was a shy kid. I'm not an entertainer. I still don't feel like that's, so it wasn't like, oh, I got to be on stage, but the expressive side of it, like wanting to write and express how I feel, really surfaced early. And in some ways it was just that friendship of songs where you hear a song and you're like, me too, just this like thing you'd hear. I mean, so resonating with show tunes or stories that I would see if I went to see musicals and would watch like, The Sound of Music or Music Man or Bye Bye Birdie or Hello Dolly. Like all these shows, I remember being around that, and I would My Fair Lady, that's another one. And those stories, I started to think like, oh man, it's not that we burst into song in our normal life, but I think the permission to do that, even if that's the art form that says, yes, we could, and we would burst into song or jump on the table and have a dance party. I think
fun.
Living in a way where music becomes part of the story and then the songwriting comes out of that. So I just wanted to be around that. But I don't know if it was until I moved to Nashville in 95, and I think the doorway into doing music for a living, it didn't occur to me. I wasn't ambitious about it, but when I realized I could study music in college, that was the first time I thought another level of permission. Not just music education, which is what I always thought I would probably do, but actually like just study the performance. Go in and study songwriting and learn how to arrange things and learn how to work with a band. And so that was, I think it was probably not till the mid-90s that I realized like this is actually, there is a path here, and it's not an obvious path, but it's a good path to make a living at music.
So did you go to college here?
Yeah, so I went to Belmont.
Belmont?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and
Great
I remember
school.
looking at that school curriculum and thinking, you mean I get to do this? Like I could study these classes. I could study like audio engineering right alongside publishing and songwriting and sit with these other artists. It was a great program.
That's awesome. It is a great program. Great instructors, great people.
Yeah.
So many artists, both Christian and country and pop, have just
all kinds of genre.
They've had a few people on The Voice.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
Melinda Doolittle.
Yeah,
she
Melinda,
and I were at Belmont together.
She's so great. I love her.
I do too.
So you're here. You went to Belmont, started studying this stuff, and then kind of what happened?
You mentioned Reformed University Fellowship. Part of my college experience was just to be folded up into that community, and we would study the Bible, and we would sing old hymns, largely old hymns with 8 verses, and just sit around together with guitars. So it wasn't in a structured environment, but singing them kind of in that dorm room setting was a new way to experience worship, and to worship where I'm not just at church or not just in my parents' house or not just because I'm supposed to, but realizing that these hymns, I needed them. That college was transition, and it was stretching. It was like lonely. Like just to come from a big family into a city where I knew one person, and to just start over with your life when I was like barely, like I had just turned 18, I guess, when I first moved here. And so it was, I think all of that was a time when I needed and wanted those hymns. So, and at the same time, I kind of avoided, so I started to see, just being immersed in Nashville and the Christian music industry, I think I started to just observe and pay attention and just say, I don't know if that's the path for me. It might be. I just want to kind of focus on developing this craft of songwriting and see where it goes. Mm-hmm. I had some resistance to how marketing was connected to faith. And part of that's because moving to the Bible Belt, where there's an assumption of going to church and there's an assumption of faith, there's a language of it. Being in St. Louis, there was no assumption of belief in my, growing up largely in public schools until the last 2 years. But it was very different, So both the Christian music as an industry, as a marketing thing, where you talk about faith as a way of selling a product. And I was like, I'm not sure about this, guys. So I had a little surprising resistance to that. And so I just started, I think I got quiet and I started paying attention. And then that put me on a path of independent music that was a little more outside of those confines. And I think that was a good path for me for a number of reasons. There are other paths, and they're good paths too. But for me, that was a good one. Yeah. And helped me to get some shape and identity around songwriting and around my art that I think I needed. Yeah.
So for those listening who might not know what RUF, Reformed University Fellowship, is, maybe you could explain a little bit of that. Yeah. And maybe it was just kids sitting around singing hymns with guitars. But it really kind of grew into a whole movement that's affected a lot of universities. Correct? Am I correct about that?
That's right.
Kevin Twitt and I'm sure many other notable people whose names escape me at this moment. Yeah. But talk a little bit about that. And then that grew into a record label called Indelible Grace that is still going, correct?
Still more albums, that's right.
Yeah.
So when I say I had one friend in Nashville, that one friend was Kevin Twitt. He's the only person I knew in Tennessee, and moved down to college right when he took a job as a college pastor at a church in Franklin, Christ Community Church.
Great church.
Yeah, so that was a huge part of it.
Yeah, Scotty Smith.
Scotty Smith. So we called it Big Church. Scotty would teach at Big Church, and then Kevin would teach the Sunday school class, which really just became the college ministry and the Reformed University Fellowship at Belmont. And there's one there are several in the area, Vanderbilt and MTSU, and just kind of all around. But as that was growing, there was an emphasis on singing hymns, and part of that, the thing beneath that was that there's an emphasis on theology. and really studying a depth of theology based on the Reformed tradition, just digging into who is God and how do we worship him? What does it look like to be shaped by a worldview that affects all of life and that gives us permission to, I'll back up a little bit to say some of that worldview was really shaped by the work of Francis Schaeffer and Labrie,
Of course.
Labrie. So I think early on I was influenced by Labrie and those teachings, and then Reformed University Fellowship reestablished that and highlighted that and said, hey, all of life is sacred. Abraham Kuyper. I mean, this Dutch Reformed tradition, even in some ways, that wasn't that wasn't always my church. I mean, I was kind of in a lot of different sort of churches, evangelical churches, but that teaching that all of life is sacred, that there is not a square inch of this earth and of this universe that God doesn't say, this is mine.
It's good.
And so this is good. And he is, I think it maybe goes back to, the record player in the front room of our house saying, this is good. Go do something that you love because it's good. And it doesn't mean you have to be in a church to do something that's sacred, and it can look like a lot of different applications of vocation and calling on your life. And so for me, that was taking shape in music and just saying it might be a church song or it might be a song about, something I've experienced or the way I see the world. And so all of that was growing together, and that college ministry helped to equip me toward that and helped me to, it really took root in my heart and in my life through that.
But you wrote tons of songs, right? With Indelible Grace and records. And
we started recording. I think the first album was sometime when I was in college. I mean, it was late 90s, and have been recording those albums ever since. And I think even still, a lot of those songs are based on text from old hymns.
Right.
And a lot of those old hymns are ones that are not just Amazing Grace or Be Still My Soul, but songs that are out of circulation that you wouldn't know the text. And there's just a wealth of hymns that are just sitting in books that we haven't been singing. And the poetry is so, it has endured the time, kind of the test of time. And that is also a great place to study the craft of songwriting, of melody writing, and to explore how that fits together with a poem that's like a high quality, excellent piece of art already before you get to it. I think that's a good challenge and has been a place that a lot of us within the Indelible Grace community have learned a lot about songwriting and lyric writing.
Yeah, it's a little known fact that there are 19 verses to "Oh for a Thousand Tongues," right? Right. I mean, seriously, I'm not joking. They're 19, and a lot of writers get stuck on the second verse.
Right.
It's be like the Wesleys, right? Dozens of verses to one idea. So are you still involved with Indelible Grace and producing? And
yeah, we're still, every couple of years, we'll usually do a new project, and I still go back there to those songs when I have moments of where I need somebody else's words, and I still go back to those records, and I still will sit down at the piano and revisit those songs. They bring me a lot of comfort, and I think I've heard so many stories, countless stories over the years of people, beside a hospital bed or at a wedding or at the birth of a child or the loss of a child, all these kind of life moments when you don't know what to say. But when you have a catalog, sort of a songbook, as it were, of what you believe and how you feel and how you can just hold those and lean into those in the moments of major life happenings. And I think because it has that historic depth and the theological depth in those songs, it gives us an anchor.
Wow. Let's spend a little more time on that, because I think that's really important for people that are, a lot of our audience, they are aspiring songwriters, and I fuss at them all the time because I feel like they sit down to write ex nihilo, just out of nothing. And it's like, guys, you got to fill yourself up with great words if you expect to write great words. And Sandra, I really thought God forgave my sins. And then he sent me to Grand Rapids, Michigan for 5 years as a worship pastor, where it's really cold. And we had
Yes.
112 inches of snow one year. And my wife, she was like ready to leave me because it was so cold up there. But we had a great time. But I was serving in a Dutch Reformed church. I was actually part of the Reformed Church of America, the RCA, and at a nice church up there in the Grand Rapids area. But I learned a lot, about their. It wasn't that we did unusual hymns out of the Dutch Reformed tradition, but it's very influential. So
Right.
maybe let's talk a few minutes about the depth and the theology and how can songwriters kind of tap into that again, and what need do you see for that?
It's a great question. It's an important question. And I would say maybe it starts with Sabbath, which sounds like a very kind of it may sound like a heady thing to say, but basically before you fill up with something, or, you were talking about like creating out of nothing and sitting down with a blank page. We are in a moment historically of so much immediacy and so much short-term information, disposable information, consumer-driven correspondence. Everything is, and I don't want to hyperbolize, but like our relationships have become so transactional. Our communication, we settle for these brief interactions between other human beings that are on a tiny phone, or
tweets and Instagrams.
Yeah, like there is such a limit to. We are training ourselves to be quick and to be efficient and to be immediate, and by these habits, by how often we check these things, and I don't mean it as a judgment. Last night I was like, after church, and then I was getting ready to go to bed, and I meant to check one thing on my phone, and like 30 minutes later, I was like, I am still surfing through a couple of things and following this rabbit trail, and it's like, and I'm not even on Facebook, it's like I kind of broke the Facebook habit, but there's still something else that will be a rabbit trail. And then I was so mad that I just filled my head and my heart with that right before I went to bed, And so as much as I can talk about that, it's a confessional thing to say, I do not want to be shaped by these immediate, short-circuited ways of getting connection and making connection. And I'm more inclined to that when I feel alone. Sunday is a day that's charged, because it's like you're going to feel all the big emotion on a Sunday, because it's a day we're made for connection, and we're made for feasting, and we're made for that. And even if I've been to church, there is something in our spirit that needs the rest of God, like that he gives us rest. And if we're not writing out of a place of spaciousness and of being filled up and nourished by God, it's not just about feeding our souls with the information and the theology. It's about resting in him in that way. And all those things are important. I mean, the theology is important. The study is important. Reading. But I think the habits of what does it mean to deepen and to train ourselves, to deepen our connection with each other and with him, and to train ourselves into being able to sit for longer periods of time rather than these short interactions. I think that will produce art that has more depth. And it's just a hard time to try to do that, to cultivate that,
It's countercultural.
It is.
And counterintuitive. In our time.
Yeah.
Who are you reading now, and who do you go back to time and again?
Good question. Right now I am reading, I'm actually revisiting Wendell Berry, which kind of answers both questions.
You're right, yeah.
It's been a little while since I have read one of his novels, and so I'm reading Remembering, and then I'm reading another book called Holy Listening, which is about this woman in New York City who practices like counseling and spiritual direction, and she talks about what it is to listen to each other and to listen to God, and it's so good, just generally in relationship. It's so applicable to relationship. And what else am I reading these days? It's been a busy summer. I think I've been journaling a lot when I don't have the margin for good reading. I think winter is a good time for digging into
Right.
books, isn't it? And then summer feels like kind of let the leash out.
Right.
You know, but it's funny how these seasons, it's just like putting the sweaters away for one time and then taking out the flip-flops at another time. And I think similarly, there are these cycles in our mode of how we take things in and how we spend ourselves.
Right. So you mentioned novels versus nonfiction or theological reading. I call it theopoetic kind of reading. Richard Rohr, Brennan Manning, Henry Nouwen, Frederick Buechner.
Yeah.
You know, those are the people I go back to.
I do too.
Not exactly your straight down the line evangelical, sorry guys, you know, kind of reading, but those are the people that inspire me and kind of shock me a little bit.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite?
Yeah, Henry Nouwen is probably my favorite. And I think that, I think those are good. And I also like Thomas Merton in these little small bits because I can just take like a paragraph and just chew on it for, I think I'm at a time where I value not reading more, but reading and responding to it and sitting with it. And so that kind of density in writing is really helpful. Even if I don't agree with all of it, or if I'm like, I really don't know what I think about that. I tend to have to address it, and then it produces contemplation or thought throughout the day that helps me in that spacious effort to create room in the margins, which I think ultimately feeds creativity and just, human flourishing in general. But
I like the shock value.
Yeah.
I feel like it's awesome every now and then to go read stuff that you don't agree with or you don't think you agree with, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because it affronts your assumptions and the things that you've just taken for granted that you believed. And then, Merton, Nouwen, more socially active, maybe the others too, but definitely Nouwen and his activism. And yet he took care of the disabled.
Right.
Was Adam, I think was his name? I
think so.
Bathed him, cared for him. For I don't know how many years, but I mean, how many of us, wind up in that situation? All of the contribution that he could bring through his writing, and I'm sure it did, of course, in his works, but the humility and just the willingness to go serve a human being like that.
Yeah.
Willingly. Not a family member, you're right,
Yeah.
Not an aging parent or a disabled child, but someone just to go do that. I'm just always amazed when I read him about that.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I don't know that we go willing into a lot of things that are uncomfortable, That's
for real.
We resist that.
Yeah. Well, awesome stuff. So your last few albums, let's move on into talking about your current release, but you did Psalms and then God's Highway, and then this new and Steadfast is more of a blend, a live experience with the video, and it's beautiful, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations. So maybe catch us up a little bit on your discography. Did I say that right? I did. Discography. And kind of what's important to you, because you've done, do you know how many albums you've done so far?
I guess this would be 12.
Yeah.
Official. I mean, there are lots of little side trails,
Right.
but side projects, but I think 12. And it's gone by fast. And there's a lot represented in there. When I look back over the whole thing, I see evidence of even some of the things we've been talking about, like the care for narrative songwriting, the care for hospitality, poetry, theology, all of that stuff has been represented. But in the last few albums and on Steadfast as well, there is, I'm going directly to the source and using biblical texts as the primary. Just like that's what I'm drawing from for the lyric. So sitting with a text and trying to slow down a little bit and seeing what resonates and how it resonates, and what does it sound like when I sing it, and what does it feel like when I imagine this text all throughout the day. So it really is a continuation of what we're saying, like this slowing down, less is more kind of writing. And it was probably informed in a few years before Psalms, as I began to write songs for children and this little side project called Rain for Roots. I joined with some other friends and mothers, and we started writing songs for our kids that we wanted to like tuck these truths of Scripture in their hearts. And writing for children is really opened up something for me in terms of the. If a kid wants to sing it, it's a good sign, And it doesn't mean you have to dumb it down. Quite the contrary. It actually has to be magnetic. The melody has to be singable and magnetic, and that they would want to hear it again or sing it again. And I think prior to that, I had experienced in my own work everything was so self-referential. You know what I mean? It's like, how does this sound in my voice? How does this make me feel? And it's just like, and that's okay. And I don't regret that. But I think having worked with kids, it helped me to not think so much about myself. And then my melodies, I think really, it's like they trained me to think more about other people when I would sing. So out of that has come on Psalms and God's Highway, just this a deepening of a desire to sing together, and not just with kids, but with everybody. And so it's full circle back to folk music. What does it mean to sing songs together and have music be a part of our communal experience, like that we would have songs that we know and love and that remind us of times and that hold us up when we need them, and bring joy in the sorrow. And so the Psalms, I drew a lot from the Psalms, and then Isaiah, and then over to the New Testament, some of the letters, and just these different moments of Scripture. And that's what's really reflected in Steadfast in this new project, but really just in the last few years of singable music that that draws directly from the source of Scripture. And while I would say it's not more sacred to do that, it certainly has been a real joy for me and been very life-giving.
Wow.
So
that's excellent. So many questions were going through my mind when you were talking about that. Which one do I go with now? Because it is kind of an organic experience for those listeners who would be blessed to go out and purchase, download the video and the album itself. It's organic, and it feels as it was recorded at the Art House here in Nashville with friends. You had Liz Weiss. I want you to tell us a little bit about Liz, wonderful moment there. And then you collaborated with David and Leslie, all sons and daughters. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about that, how that came together. And just watching the video is so... it's homey, it's organic, it's beautifully done. The producer, Zach, is that right?
Yeah, Zach Prichard.
God, he did a great job. And just the lighting and the audio is so present and just beautifully done. So maybe just talk a little bit about that experience and tell us a little bit about working with All Sons and Daughters and Liz.
Yeah. It really was a community experience being there together. I tour throughout the year and had been touring. I've been touring with this band, and I've also toured with All Sons and Daughters, and just these different. What you experience when you're out in a room together with people is so. It's so unique, and every night is a little bit different, and there's a mood from a particular audience, and so this is a way of documenting and commemorating what that is to be in a room together. And I think in that small setting of the Art House, you really get to step into it in a way that you don't have all the production or the lights or the distance from the stage, and you're just there together. And so I really enjoy that organic kind of integrated approach where it goes from singing to prayer to like a musical performance and kind of weaving all those things, like a solo or interaction. A lot of times when I play with the band, we don't have a real scripted way we do each song. So you can see on the video, like there are times that we're smiling at each other. It's because we don't really know what's going to happen next. And that being on the edge of your seat feeling, I think, is what makes you want to watch it again. And it's like, that's why I would want to go, and why I don't get tired of playing the same song. It's like, no, it's new. These are new people. This is a new day. There's a new thing that the Spirit of God moves in His words, and that He's doing that in our lives, in the room. So then you add the element of bringing in guests and friends into that. So having David and Leslie, they're in the times that we've toured together the last few years, and then in friendship, just being in the same city, it's a very genuine, real sense of shared life.
Right.
And so to be able to come back and sing these songs together, like to sing with Leslie on that song With Great Gentleness, it's like that's a picture of the song is meant to show like the gentleness of God, inviting us to be kind to ourselves and to be received by Him. And then what more of a picture is there than actual friendship and harmony in your voices?
It sounds great too.
Thank you.
I mean, too bad you guys can't sing, but she's so good.
She's so gifted. So, and then Liz Weiss is a new friend, and I reached out to her several months ago. I guess it was sometime before this project, and the song that we did together on the record continuously is from Psalm 73, and just something about that song. It just was. It was a bridge. It was like this bridge of saying, hey, I think this would be. I'd been listening to her record for a long time, and just love it. I think Liz has. She is translucent, like she just shows the light of God and who she is, and in her work and in her voice, and there's just no pretense about her. And so when I called her and we developed a friendship, it was like, oh man, I feel like I've always known her, and then to be able to sing together on that and to work together on some other projects and collaborations, it's just been, she continues to inspire me, her ability to just jump into things. And she just moved to New York this last year from Portland. It's like just hearing her talk about that. And she experienced some illness for a while. And to come out of a season, sometimes when you watch people come through suffering and they either kind of become more self-preserving or they become more courageous. And when you see that courage, you realize like there's this reciprocation where it's like God is blessing them in their suffering and then making their sorrow fruitful, really. And I see that in Liz, and it's been really a joy to work with her. So yeah, that all is happening in the room, and all the stories of people in my community, in my church community, friends that were there, and then other friends that I've corresponded with over the years that I know have experienced great loss and great redemption in their lives. And just to see these like images of us singing together. Each one has a story and I get to know those stories, and that feels like a front row seat on God's kingdom breaking in. And it's not the final word, but man, you glimpse it in that. I felt like I glimpsed it that night, and we get to. And then Zach being able to put all that out so beautifully, like put it all together where you can watch it and you can watch it again. It's like a way of saying like, yes, Lord, I see you.
Yeah, it's just the kind of thing you could have playing a lot, whether you want to sit down and dedicate time to just experiencing it. I would definitely recommend that. But it's the kind of thing where I just have it on sometimes, just as I'm working, because it's non-intrusive. Right. It's deep and rich, and like a tapestry of wonderful elements.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Thank
So,
you.
Are you going to be touring Steadfast?
We'll do some of that. I have some. I am at a stage in life where I really try to hold the balance between all those things. I don't want to just be busy. I want to tour in a meaningful way. So I typically will do some on weekends. And so there is some scarcity to that where it's not like all the time. But I love it because those points of connection where you get to be with people. So I will do some touring in the spring and a little bit this fall, and I feel like that's an important part of staying. I'm committed both to the local community, and I serve at a church here in Nashville, and then the wider church, and just that invitation, like being out in places and
It's awesome.
seeing what God does with that. But I love getting to play music and to collaborate musically with the band.
That's awesome. So 12 albums, hundreds of songs, probably. I don't know how many, but all of these opportunities to speak into people's lives. How do you stay fresh in your songwriting? Or do you? Maybe.
Good question.
And then, what are some of the things that have been important disciplines for you? We've talked about theology and reading and that type of thing, but what would you share with our audience as far as your songwriting process and what gets you into that zone where you feel like you're connecting creatively?
That is a good question.
I'm asking good questions today, aren't I?
I keep saying that. It's just, there are two ways to go. One, I think I would say I think structure helps me to be more creative. So having a routine. And I know a lot of writers talk about their process around like, okay, I get up at this time and I sit in this chair and I do this routine. So I have some things that are ritual for me. Like I drink tea. I drink English tea and kind of have it a certain way, and I have it at a certain temperature, and it's like, in a certain kind of mug, or a china cup. And so there are things like that I've enjoyed more and more. And I think partly it's because I'm a free spirit that I really love those kinds of little regular things. But I also think the other answer, I kind of have two answers and they're opposite. The other thing is disruption. So when you go out and you come back, when you shake things up a little bit, and that can look like a lot of things. Like sometimes it's a life change, or it's rearranging the furniture, or it's taking a trip, and or going on a silent retreat, or these things. I think we need order and we need disruption. And sometimes, if you've been living in one, just try the other. You know what I mean? So they both, I think, help creativity for me. But I don't know that I'm religious about either, because I think they're both important. So that's why I was kind of thinking that's a challenging question, because I could answer it either way, but maybe the answer is both.
Right. No, that's a great answer. So do you tend to, other than when you're working with some historic texts or hymns or that type thing, do you generally come up with an idea first, a melody first, a hook first, just the essence of something first? How does that work for you?
For better or worse, my songwriting is it closely follows like an emotional lead. So if I have a strong feeling about something, if I'm going through something, if I feel empathy for somebody that I love who's going through something, as I live into the places where, and it's not like the emotion's in charge, but that is, it's usually the point of entry, into a text or into a thing. And that's what's interesting. I mean, that changes because as our emotions change and our circumstances. So the hymns, if I'm flipping through an old hymnal, if I've had, if there's something that's going on in my church community, then I'm going to be drawn to the hymns that are connected to that. We're in a moment, I think, where there is a renewed emphasis and need for songs about justice, the justice of God, and what does it mean to move forward in reconciliation and across lines of differences. And as we think about some of that, we can go back to see, what have people said before? Not just like, what are my ideas about it? How do I feel about it? But how do I take the emotion and start at this emotional place, but go into a more historic, really reflect on it, give it time, and then see what comes out of that. So yeah, it can be driven by circumstances and emotion. And then the other things are, I just kind of have to go do some research.
Yeah. Cool. If you could say one thing to the aspiring writers listening today, what would that be? About developing their craft, I guess, is more the question.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing about developing the craft of songwriting or anything in the arts, is to learn how to not put filters on, like how to not pretend to be something you're not to sing like someone or write like someone or think about how it's supposed to be done and whatever that means for you. But to take off those filters and try to just speak plainly. So speaking from a place of like your real voice, your real self. I think, speaking of Buechner, I think Frederick Buechner calls it like we each have like a shimmering self, and I think that's not the same as just being narcissistic. It's not just like, oh, it's all about me, but it's resting in the fact that God has made each of us uniquely, and so if we speak out of that place of personhood, that's gonna draw people. That's what we want from each other. That's how we connect to each other. It's like by being our real selves and not trying to be some other thing that we think we're supposed to be. And then when we realize that God loves us that way, there's no stopping what kind of beauty comes out at that point. Because that's showing the abundance of God channeling straight into us and making us uniquely and how we see the world and what we've felt and what we want to see happen and what we hope for. And so I think the creative process in general is the hard work is getting those filters off.
Wow. So articulate, so beautiful. Unfiltered with Sandra McCracken. I love it. This has been rich. This is so rich. Wow. I'm loving this. I sort of need to bring it in for landing those. So
okay.
That's great stuff. Let's talk a little bit. So we know about the Steadfast and kind of what's going on there. You write relevant. You've CCM magazine, others I'm kind of reading here in the bio. So that's a part of your ministry as well, just writing, reaching out through your writing gift beyond songs.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited about that. That snuck up on me a little bit. I have a high regard for, I love books and I love good writing, and because of that, I've always kept a safe distance because I don't know if I feel qualified to contribute in that way. And I think...
So you probably will.
I think, well, thank you. I'm
sure you will.
I'm kind of putting a toe in the water there. And I realized that as many years as I've journaled, that is a very natural place where I can express myself and where I want to express myself. Mm-hmm. Even if it doesn't feel like an academic thing, I'm excited about. Even just the way that helps me to... Writing enables me to get quiet, and I don't have to travel for that. I can, but I don't have to. It feels like that might be a thing I enjoy for the second half of life.
That's awesome. Well, I can't wait. I'm excited to add your books to the collection.
Thank you.
So is your podcast Steadfast with Sandra McCracken still on track for launching in September?
Yes.
Got some great people. It looks like you've got coming up. Preview episode is already on iTunes. You can look up Steadfast with Sandra McCracken, and then upcoming episodes, your fans, interviews, people like Dr. Stephen Garber, founder and principal of the Washington Institute for Faith, Vocation, and Culture. Mm-hmm. James K.A. Smith, which I'm familiar with, professor of philosophy at Calvin, up in Grand Rapids where we were. Liz Weiss, gospel, soul, and R&B musician. Peter Smith, professor of philosophy at Calvin. You're digging... Oh, wait. No, wait. My eyes jumped. Hang on. That is co-founder of, how do you say, Aroka?
Arasha.
Arasha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a Portuguese word.
Tell us a little bit about your podcast and Arasha, because I know that's dear to your heart. And then also Kevin Finch, executive director of Big Table, and a lot more. I'm sure it's going to be great.
Thank you. Yeah, that's been really fun. I love talking with people. I love talking with you. I love this process of just sitting down and seeing where the conversation takes you. It is. It really is. So
I love it.
That was just an idea of getting more deeply into the songs and seeing what it means for this word steadfast, just really meaning the faithfulness of God. So digging into that with people and hearing more stories and reflecting back how we see him showing up in the circumstances of our lives. Sometimes through suffering, sometimes through exploration and vocation and all these things. So, it's been a joy to see that come to fruition.
So you have so much going on, parenting, podcasting, and promoting, and all the P words.
The P words.
That's great.
That's right.
Well, Sandra, it's been just rich to have you on.
Thank you.
And I just really want to acknowledge you and take a moment to just thank you for the contribution that you have made over these years into the hymnody and just the worship experience of so many people through RUF, Indelible Grace, your own ministry. Now you're writing and podcasting in this new Steadfast album. So we certainly pray for the best and thank God for your ministry. And it's been a pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you so much.
I really look forward to next time.
My pleasure.
Thanks for being here today for the Song Revolution podcast from Nashville Christian Songwriters. We exist to empower you and to bring you some of the greatest inspiration, insights, and important people from the Christian music world to help you write your best and to be heard as the songwriter that you were born to be. Be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us over on Twitter and Instagram, and connect with us through our Facebook group called Successful Christian Songwriters. Until next time, I'm John Chisum calling you to a song revolution.